That's the first thing I grabbed. Well, good afternoon. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this afternoon's zoning case, Kelly Tractor IPD amendment. The case number is DCI 2023-00046. The date is April 24th. We have no court reporter here today because we did not anticipate there being much public participation, and that's turned out to be true. All testimony and evidence I accept during these hearings must be taken in under oath, so if you intend to speak at the podium today, I ask that you raise your right hand.
Oh.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place in the record will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. I will dispense with the other information I normally go into when we have public here, and we can begin.
Well, good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Good to see you again. So today is a pretty simple team. So one of our representatives that I've been working with is Gabriel Genham from Magna Sign. But here with me today is Anna, who works actually for Kelly Tractor. So we have the sign. The sign is the guy who's the applicant, but then the representative for Kelly Tractor is here just in case there's some questions. And then me, Fred Drovic, is part of RVI, and I'd like to be accepted today as an expert in land use and planning before you.
Yes, please proceed.
All right. Housekeeping, I got some printouts for you. I have several things, so it'll be 4 or 5 different exhibits. So, however you want to label these. So there's the PowerPoint presentation printed in color.
Right, that'll be applicant exhibit 1.
All right. And the copy of our sign package that was in the application, just so you have a good print of that. The staff report one came out pretty decent. So that's the sign package. I have the MCP, even though it isn't super relevant in this case. I know you like the MCP. I have an 11 by 17 of it and a 24 by 36.
Okay, that'll be exhibit 3, composite.
And so those 3. These are, I'll keep them in order for you, so you number. And then the last one would be a line of sight plan on 11 by 17. Shows the distance to the nearest residential.
So the MCP is dated what? What's the date on that?
I did change that. So did I change the date to April 16th?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was expecting a replacement MCP. So then just give me a moment to mark these.
I think I have them in the order that I read off.
All right, and then once I do that, you can begin. All right.
All right, we're here before you today to amend the Kelly Tractor Industrial Plan Development IPD. It was approved in Resolution Z91095 and 095, and only had one administrative deviation or administrative amendment since then. So digging up an oldie but a goodie here. So when we're here today to just speak about the sign, the identification sign that's currently a 20-foot, 144-square-foot sign. We're here to replace that sign and ask for the allowance to build a taller sign that's larger in sign area than the code allows. So we're doing the amendment. and we applied the variance criteria to that for the Caloosahatchee Shores planning community. Whether or not that applies exactly or not, really, I guess, is less relevant to us, because I think we meet the criteria either way, and I think the variance criteria really captures the idea of what we're trying to do best anyway. I'll walk through. I have a number of pictures that are different than the staff report, just to, some that I took, some from Google Street View, and just one, and then local area ones, just to give you a good idea of what's around there in case. Did you drive by the site, or
I did.
do you regularly?
I've gone by the site on the interstate, and also I've gone to the site.
Yeah. Okay. Great. The actual site is part of the larger IPD, which is 58.5 acres. So in the center there in the red is the actual Kelly Tractor IPD. The site we're talking about where the sign is located is the 12.7 acre. On the MCP it says 13 acres. I don't think that matches the plat exactly, but so the 12.7 acre site is where the actual Kelly Tractor is, and that's where the sign is. To the north, Crystal Lakes Mobile Home Park, that's where we did the line of sight study from that closest mobile home trailer there. To across the interstate is the Billy Creek Industrial Park. That's where the Truck Pro sign is, that is similar in height, and part of the sign is similar in sign area, although this one is a little bit different, and I'll show you that. But there's a Truck Pro sign there that's similar in location and height to what we're proposing. And then Cypress Woods behind it. Haven't heard anything from there. The line of sight was really, the distance was pretty good, and there's so much separating it, we didn't do the line of sight from that angle. We paid attention to the mobile home park to the north. And then Camping World to the south, which is, everybody knows it has the huge flag and a big sign on that piece of property there. And we'll walk through that piece as well. Let's see. So actually there, just because of the reference with the quadrant allowances for interstate signs, the center point from the Luckett Road I-75 to the edge of our property, the edge of this 12.7 acre property is over the 1,500 feet, so it's about 1,800 feet, so we're not in the quadrant for an interstate sign. So a little close-up of the 12.7 acres, mentioned what was zoned. The future land use is industrial interchange. The recent action was an ADD 2015-114. It was for an on-site sign, for a setback for an on-site sign. And I'll show you pictures of that just so the two don't get confused. And as mentioned, there was a Caloosahatchee Shores planning community plan area. We did have a public meeting. We didn't have any public show up. I held it at the Riverdale Lee County Library, and waited there for 45 minutes for the scheduled time, and nobody showed up. We did receive one call from the public in support, which is kind of crazy. So usually the people in support aren't going to give a call. So they gave a call, left a message, made sure I got their number and everything. So I don't even know where they were from, actually. So it's either Crystal Lakes or Cypress Woods, but either way they didn't object. MCP, pretty simple. There is the square on the side is the ground sign that is not part of this amendment. So the prior deviations 1 through 5 we're not touching. We're not amending those in any way, except there's a little language piece on the MCP that referenced the existing sign of 144 square feet. We did reference that it's changing to the 616 that's calculated here, but we're adding 2 new deviations, deviations 6 and 7.
So this is a replacement sign
Correct.
of the sign that's located in the very corner of the site.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Same. We're going to put it in the same place, the same setback. I mean, the footprint may change and may just slightly, but really for the most part, it fits within everything that is there already. It's just taller with a little more structural to hold it up, and more sign area. Nothing else in the IPD is being altered or discussed other than little tweaks that we had to just do to match some stuff up with the plat. There was some weird line work on the MCP that we corrected, but it is unaffected for the overall IPD. So there's the existing ground sign, and you might have saw this when you went to do your site visit. You drive right past this with the if you're driving towards the interstate here, it's on your right, and the other sign that we are replacing would be directly in front of you. So this is what that ADD was part of for the setback for the small sign that was on site. Not doing anything with this sign. So here's photos of the current sign. When I was out there posting the zoning signs, I took some pictures here to just give you some references of what's going on in the area. So that's the location of the sign. There's a couple of drainage areas on each side of the sign. So one is on the right, on upper right-hand picture is the IPD. That's the IPD associated drainage that goes to the on-site lake. That is still part of the property. And then there's the sign, and then beyond that is the FDOT drainage, which is part of a canal that goes north and then continues northeast for a while and actually connects clear to Orange River. So it's part of just overall drainage. So it's a little bit unique. You go south of here in I-75, and even on the other side, there isn't this large kind of drainage area that's included in the FDOT right away. So the distance from the Kelly Tractor sign to the road is a little bit farther than a lot of places on I-75. And then in addition to that, there's a little extra distance, but then there's a fair amount of mature trees and other vegetation in the area that when you're driving down, you get glimpses of the sign, but you really really have to be looking for it, because there's several angles that I'll show you that it's completely blocked by, you know, fairly large signage or vegetation. So I use Google Street View from this to not try to take pictures as I'm driving and get my wife to yell at me for doing stupid things. So Street View gave a pretty good accurate picture of this. There's the existing sign. You can see it's even hidden by kind of a large, I don't know what that is, some Brazilian pepper, some little tree, but it isn't even the big pines that block it. It was some of the lower vegetation that's either within within the right of way. Looks like maybe it's some palms and some stuff like that. So that gives you an idea of the scale of it now, the scale of the trees next to it, and how the view shed is, at least when you're traveling north. From south, it's actually a lot worse, as you might guess, because you're looking clear across the lanes of traffic. So those large trees that we're pointing out block it for the most part, except for right when you're near it, you look directly left, then you can catch the sign. But for the most part, traveling south, you don't really see the sign at all. A little bit in the area, the sign I referenced across the I-75 is Truck Pro. It's actually in the I think it's actually in the quadrant, but it is not a full-size quadrant sign. But it's about 60 feet high, and it's about just under 200 feet in sign area. Which I'll show you that. But the main part of our sign that says Kelly Tractor is going to be just about the same size as that one, but we have additional the LED or the LCD screen underneath that as well. So we do have more sign area, but the overall effect is probably going to feel very similar in look to that one. So here's just another view, northwest quadrant, the 60-foot, 199 square feet sign area for Truck Pro. There's the other ones that are in the southwest and the northeast quadrant. One is the I said Love's earlier, as Pilot gas station there that is in the quadrant. So it's 100 feet tall, 700-foot sign area, same as the Camping World sign, just south of our sign. And then when you're traveling north, you can see that even from the street view and stuff, that I mean, a lot of times it's low and you just can't see it very well. Here's the sign area, and we went back and forth a little bit with staff on this, just how do we calculate the sign area. So the top sign is a 7 by 28, so it's 196 square feet. So similar to the Truck Pro as far as the visual impact. And then there's a lot of dead space in between that, and then the LED board, which is limited to the 96 square feet. But then in the dead area, the total that we're requesting today is 616 square feet, but obviously there's the better part of a little more than half of that is dead space, open space, whatever you want to call white space. So the overall visual impact is just under 300 square feet, but then according to the code, we're at 1,616 square feet. This is a picture of what it would look like. So you can see that some of those trees are a little bit taller than what we're going to be, but that's approximate location. It's not it's an okay representation of it. So that's where one of the ways it would look as you're traveling north. And then obviously the 20-foot sign below will be removed. Don't look at where the feet are actually on that sign. That's not quite accurate. They are going to be in the exact same footprint as the existing one. So that picture needs to be a little twisted and moved a little bit, but for the most part, it gives you a good idea.
And the existing sign will be removed from the property?
Yep. Yep, a true replacement. Our line of sight. So we took it from the nearest mobile home from Crystal Lakes, looking south. So we're approximately a little over 1,100 square feet from where the proposed sign will be to the nearest home, and it has to traverse in order to see that. You look through the preserve area that's in the back of the property, which is pretty dense, and the trees are fairly mature since it was really established in early 90s. So they've had a lot of years to grow. So the preserve is actually very effective there, and then obviously from the ground standpoint, you're completely blocked, but if you're looking up at the proper angle, if you could see through the trees, you might be able to see just the top of the sign just over the Kelly Tractor actual building. So the building actually blocks the majority of the view from the nearest residence.
So what does this person see? What are you illustrating here?
Yeah, when I was back there, I don't see anything except pretty dense trees.
Right. Well, and there isn't anything to see right now, but.
Yeah, I can't see.
So did they see only outside this vector, or did they see within the vector?
You could see outside of it, but we're showing in the vector is where you could see the.
Could see, but
sign.
You're saying between the understory and the trees and the building, it's obscured.
Yeah, you have this little area that you'd be looking, and that would actually catch the sign. So really about a 5 or 10 foot area where you're looking 5 or 10 feet above the building, you would be able to catch the very top of the sign. Beyond that, you wouldn't be seeing anything except sky or trees. The understory there is very thick, so I had to move around a little bit to catch the building.
Okay.
So 2 new deviations. One is to allow a combined 616 square foot sign to replace the 144 square foot sign. Staff recommends approval with conditions. Conditions there are on the right. We agree with the conditions. We agree with the staff report in whole. We think it was accurate and represented what we wanted to accomplish and meets the code. So some of the conditions are obviously has to be in compliance with our sign package. Copy changes permitted provided sign area of each sign is measured individually does not exceed its respective sign area. Ground mounted identification sign may not contain more than 96 square feet for the ECMC, the digital sign piece. That's strict in code, and we can't request deviations from that. So that is a hard line. And then deviation limited to the location as approved on the master concept plan. And then second deviation was from the height to allow 60 feet tall. So one for area, one for height. I'm not going to go over my expert opinion. Staff report captures the objectives, policies, and comp plan consistencies well. We agree with those in whole. So the policies and objectives that are mentioned there and included in the applicant's package and in the staff report find that we're consistent with the Lee plan, particularly the Caloosahatchee Shores planning area and the industrial interchange future land use category. The Staff finds that the request is compliant with the Lee County Land Development Code, section 34-145, that we comply with the Lee Plan, we meet the Land Development Code, is compatible with the existing uses. D isn't really relevant. There isn't any proposed development intensity necessarily. It's just signage. And then transportation facilities unaffected, environmentally critical areas. We're not touching anything that's already in preserve, and nothing else on the MCP. And then obviously urban service is already to the site, but we just need electricity to the sign. So the applicant agrees with staff, and they find that the request meets the standards below. So this is if we find that, if the hearing examiner opines that the Caloosahatchee Shores planning community variance criteria apply to the industrial category, then we're fine with that. We're not trying to argue that it doesn't, because we think the variance criteria fit. We fit the strict criteria well with the sign. So one is that it's are the conditions inherent, or they're inherent exceptional conditions that create a hardship. We think the vegetation, the drainage area on FDOT, the distance between the sign and where people would see it from I-75 is farther than normal, but mostly it's all the vegetation that's obstructing the view for a sign that is that short. So those are conditions that obviously FDOT has jurisdiction over, and the exceptional conditions are not a result of our actions. We didn't plant any of those trees, and nothing on our property is what is the obstruction or the distance. That was all the stuff that's in the FDOT area. Variance, minimum variance. So 60 feet, so the 60 feet is about where we looked at several things, and 60 feet is where that visibility is clear from all angles. We're not trying to be taller than the trees, because the trees there are pretty decent height. They're very well grown and matured, but 60 feet, similar to the Truck Pro sign, shorter than obviously the quadrant signs, but I think that relieves us from the obstructions and gives us clear view. Not injurious to the neighborhood. We haven't any public say that we are, and then there's obviously similar signs in the area and or bigger than we are as the quadrant signs in the interstate interchange. And are we consistent with the Lee Plan? And if the policy 21.1.2 does apply, then meeting these criteria make us consistent with the comp plan as well. So with that, I know staff has detail about all those criteria as well that they'll probably go into, but today in my expert opinion, I think that the request is generally consistent with the Lee Plan's goals, policies, and objectives, the Lee County's Land Development Code ordinances, and we meet the review criteria for variances and plan development amendments and the other applicable regulations. And that's all I have. Here for questions.
Thank you. So is this an amendment that is going to be final with me, or is it DCD's opinion that this case will go to the board?
For the record, Adam Mendez. That's a great question, Madam Hearing Examiner. The way that I read the LDC this morning to just check up on that says that the hearing examiner has the authority provided that there is no increase in density and intensity. And as we know, intensity is defined as lots of things, including increase in height in some instances. But I thought when these amendments are rolling out, the sentiment was intensity as in floor area, not an architectural feature. But if you would like, I could confer with the county attorney's office or DCD.
I mean, in my opinion, it's something I can have the final decision on, but I was just wondering if you had asked them to weigh in on this issue. That way we would know for certain for future cases if something like this should come up again. We can leave the record open for that opinion to be sought, and then I can go either way.
Okay, we'll do that.
And hopefully they'll get back to you quickly.
Yeah.
Because I don't anticipate this taking me a long time to prepare. Mm-hmm. And so rapid response would be beneficial.
Sounds good.
It doesn't help, but we would love for you to decide this. That would be great.
If it was a building height, I can see, I would distinguish the sign from a building, but I'd feel more comfortable if we could get a word from the county attorney's office on it.
Okay. Madam Hearing Examiner, for the record, Adam Mendez, Senior Planner at the Community Development Zoning Section. I do have a couple exhibits I want to present you. I have the staff PowerPoint presentation, which is just a series of photos, since this was a very visual case in terms of what the effect is on the PD and what the amendment is. So I have got some slides here with photos from the staff report that I'll use in my discussions. And then I also have a copy of the updated master concept plan with the revisions that were requested on the in the staff report. It's date stamped, so I didn't know if maybe you'd appreciate something with a receive stamp from staff.
So is it the identical exhibit from the applicant, only with the date stamp?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So PowerPoint, let me have that first. Okay.
And then it's 2 copies.
Okay, date stamped. Okay. Thank you for the second copy.
You're welcome.
Let me just make a note for Maria. Okay.
Okay, so in this presentation, I'm hoping to hit on 3 points. The first point is going to be the staff report's analysis concerning the criteria and which criteria should be evaluated in ensuring this request can be approved in the manner that it's been proposed. The second point I'd like to address is, while this came in as a simple sign deviation when we decided to supersede the prior resolution, there was a little complexity in that and roping in old language and approvals and finding kind of inconsistencies between the 1991 MCP and the zoning document, and trying to make sense of that for you. So I'll try to get ahead of that in case you have any questions on how we superseded the 1991 zoning resolution with this recommended conditions of approval. And then the last is just wrapping up staff's recommendation, that recommendation for the staff report, and maybe a little bit of further discussion on holistically our outlook on this amendment and the deviation that it's fostering. So I think I want to start here at the future land use categories, just to put the industrial interchange category on the map and point it out. And I wanted to also show in an inset the community boundaries of the Caloosahatchee Shores Community Plan Area, Kelly Tractor site here, and just kind of showing you where this this industrial interchange is. I want to note that there is no other industrial future land use category in the community plan area that is the Caloosahatchee Shores Community Plan Area. There's public facilities, there's suburban, there's central urban, there's even general interchange. There's no industrial, there's no other type of industrial future land use. Now granted, there are some categories that may allow industrial, like urban community and central urban and general interchange, but there's no explicit industrial future land use category except here where the community plan boundary basically insulates Buckingham from 75 for this mile stretch here.
All right, so it's in the interchange category, correct?
It's in the industrial interchange category.
Interchange. Okay, because I was puzzled by the applicant's reference to policy 1.1.3.
Was that general interchange? 1.1.3 is
That's right.
Yeah.
We'll get it worked out.
yeah. So the IPD zoning drove in the initial inquiries on how to achieve greater sign visibility, which the applicants demonstrated is deficient in terms of the allocations that are made for single-use developments. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all, whether you're a Walmart single-use establishment or you're a Dollar General. You have this 300-foot of linear road frontage cap where there's the maximum, and there's some variations for corner lots to achieve additional sign area, but you're really limited to a one-size-fits-all sign area. And on 75, where we've got motorists traveling at higher speeds, and we've got, in this case, some visual blockades, we found it appropriate to work with the applicant to identify a path that would make sense and work. And so, looking at the IPD zoning district, the mechanism for adopting departures from the Land Development Code is through a standard deviation process. Through review of the LEA plan, we pointed out that there was a policy in place that is common in many community plan areas where it says that deviations from signage and architectural requirements requires variance criteria. And so we asked the applicant to provide an analysis demonstrating that the request meets variance criteria. It wasn't until we got into the substantive review that we started looking at the structure of the goal and the applicability of the Chapter 33 regulations and trying to make sense of why this should or should not apply to an industrial future land use category if it's not explicit. And so we've made abundantly clear in this presentation, so I won't bore you, but that this current sign from many vantage points is insufficient, and it is at its max height and max sign area per a 2004 sign permit that's referenced in the whereas clauses in the 2015 ADD. And those all line up. So this is at its maximum sign height. And the sign area is measured as per code. However, the conditions of approval in the staff report will limit the actual visual impact to something far less than what could be achieved if all of this rectangle was sign area, which it's not. One of the things we asked the applicant to do is to produce something to show and demonstrate that the nearest residential area wasn't going to have a new focal point in the sky from their property. And I thought this was a great exhibit. I thought between the understory, as you mentioned, and all of the layers of visual obstructions, it's going to be obscure at best. You might have to really intentionally look for it to see it from the nearest land use of, a lower gradient intensity where we really need to discuss compatibility. Everything else around that is of the same intensity and has similar signage depending on where they fall within the distance from the interchange, the nearest interchanges. So the staff report attempts to do two things because we understand this is subject to interpretation. We try to identify that our opinion is if we read the goal of the Clusacci Shores to establish regulations for commercial and residential land uses and read the objectives and policies in line, that it doesn't really seem to speak to this really small area in the Clusacci Shores community plan. Deviations from those would be required to be maybe more rigorous criteria to preserve that community character in the visual corridor, not in some industrial area where typically in the LDC doesn't require as much articulation on buildings and concern regarding signage. So we took a look at the applicant's analysis, we looked at the surrounding land uses, and we agree that, especially in this image, and I wish we had property lines here, but you can kind of superimpose the property lines in your imagination. For almost their entire frontage on 75, you see this strip of vegetation that lies outside of their property. There's really not a lot of gaps between. There isn't a more ideal location to set this that would obviate the need for the variance. So it's not a preference, it's almost a necessity that it's here at the southern point of the property. And that just in coincidence is the furthest location from the nearest sensitive land use to the north, which is that mobile home subdivision. So it's an ideal location, and it makes sense given the exceptional conditions of this site. Now, if we look at Chapter 33 and we look at the applicability statement,
and it states that the provisions of this article apply to all development located in the Caloosahatchee Shores Community Planning Area as defined, and apply to commercial, religious, institutional, multifamily, and mixed-use development, and including live-work units. You can see perhaps where staff has a hard time finding that this article, or this article in Chapter 33 was intended to promote regulations in a very small industrial area that's in their community that's kind of
Right,
off the
just
beaten
fact
path.
that they listed all those things
Yes,
leads you to believe that that's what they intended it to apply to.
right. And if you took a different opinion, we'd be talking about putting parking in weird areas adjacent to the road. There's parking requirements where 20% can be on the side and 100, the rest has to be in the rear depending on the road. And those really seem to have been crafted for the State Road 80 corridor and for those strip developments that they were trying to beautify on Palm Beach, and not this property, not this area of the community.
Well, here's my opinion on that. I certainly appreciate this interpretation, and I feel as though an amendment to the Land Development Code would be best to clarify that. I have no problem adopting this interpretation, but I really do think it should be addressed in the Land Development Code. But it's almost irrelevant in this case because it sounds as though it meets the variance criteria, and it is an amendment to having been adopted prior to the community plan. They could amend to conform to the community plan without going to public hearing, but they needed to ask permission for this, which requires a public hearing, which suggests they now have to comply, at least as to this one item. Fortunately for them, they meet the variance criteria, so
I want to point out,
sounds like they're covered on a couple of sides here.
yeah, I wanted to point out two looming items in Chapter 33 that require, I guess, attention when considering the applicability of Chapter 33's community plan regulations to this industrial property. And that is specific in their sign regulations, and EMC is a prohibited sign. Community-wide, if you meet the applicability here, your EMC is prohibited unless you achieve a signage, unless you achieve a deviation or variance. And there's one more layer on top of that, I'll go into that. The other component is pylon signs and pole signs as exhibited are prohibited unless you get a deviation or variance. So they've got those prohibited signs that this is a pole sign or pylon sign, and it does have an EMC component. So if we find that this is applicable, the Chapter 33 provisions to this industrial property, we need to then provide a deviation for the EMC and a deviation for the pole sign. And then we have to go to the Lee plan and identify, does that policy require these deviations to meet the muster of variance criteria? And if they do, staff doesn't have any sort of information right now to provide you on whether or not those meet variance criteria. Our opinion is that between reading of both of these codes is that it's not intended to address industrial uses, the community character, sorry.
Go back. Okay.
To this sign?
No.
Okay. And that the Chapter 33 provisions, in alignment with the goal which crafted the provisions, the Chapter 33 provisions, it's just silent of industrial uses altogether. And so that's going to get us out of requiring them to meet variance criteria for a pole sign in an industrial area, and then also that EMC component. So that's where we're at. If you do find that the wordsmithing in such a way that you can't come to that conclusion, we may have to take a look at it.
It's not a stretch for me to come to that conclusion. I'm just recommending that the LDC be amended to kind of tighten that
Absolutely.
language.
Yeah, and here's the section in the code and pole signs defined in the community plan, and then the prohibition on pole signs and EMCs is just the section right above this. So it started off as, well, this is just a deviation in a PD, it meets the intent of the Lee Plan, public health, safety, welfare, and enhances the objective and achievement of the PD, certainly meets those criteria. But then when we evaluate all these other provisions that seem to be competing maybe for attention in that community, that we really wanted to try to weed out these particular provisions from applying, because then we'd be looking at the pole sign and the EMC a little differently in terms of our recommendation. So just to be clear with you, my professional opinion, they don't apply,
Okay.
and I won't further complicate the record.
Well, you're an expert planner, so rely on your testimony.
Thank you. And so wrap it up by saying the staff recommendation was summarized by Fred Well. The recommendation on conditions, we hope, straightforward. It's limiting them to exactly what they're asking for, including no ability to increase sign area within that red perimeter to a much larger sign, because we are granting them 616 square feet of sign area, but we're limiting it.
Right, it's a quirk of the code that it's
Geometric.
much larger, yeah.
It's easier for administration if we require people to do it like that. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the deviations with the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. And I guess I should also touch on the superseding resolution. If you read through the resolution in the master concept plan, you'll see that heavy industrial uses were prohibited by condition in the resolution, and then that the 60,000 square feet of heavy industrial uses that were proposed in the intensity cap, that they may be allocated to the light industrial or commercial uses per that 1991 resolution. However, the master concept plan, perhaps it made it to the board and they said, we adopt it with these recommendations, but we'll adopt this master concept plan, and the conflicting conditions in the resolution will take precedence over the master concept plan, because the master concept plan references heavy industrial uses and it encodes the lots based on which lots can use those heavy industrial uses. But the resolution doesn't, it states no heavy industrial uses are
So
permitted.
there's a conflict.
There's a conflict, so we
the
try to address that.
Conditions will apply. So why didn't they conform the master concept plan to the conditions?
In 1991, I'm not sure.
No, I'm talking about today's master concept plan.
It does.
Submitting.
Yeah, it does. It conforms. We've removed the things that made it inconsistent. We've tightened up the conditions of approval to make sense of those conflicts. And
So this resolution will replace entirely the original resolution and the administrative amendment.
that's correct, yes. And I think one other point I'd like to make is regarding that heavy industrial uses, that heavy industrial uses aren't recognized in the policy concerning the industrial interchange. It says light industry.
Yes.
So it seems to make sense, maybe perhaps at that time, that's why it was ruled out.
Probably an oversight that they didn't require the MCP to be
Consistent.
amended to conform.
Yeah. And that's where we landed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I don't have any questions. I feel as though this is a very straightforward case. I will leave the record open for that opinion from the county attorney's office as to whether this deviation falls within the intensity increase that would have triggered a board hearing. And if you let me know that quickly, I can craft my decision as a decision or a recommendation accordingly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.